Well, as he set out the EU's guidelines for the Brexit negotiations today, the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, warned that there will be no avoiding confrontation during the talks. So are we heading for several years of ill-tempered bartering between the UK and the EU? In a moment, I'll be speaking to a former UK government trade negotiator with the EU, Michael Johnson. But first, joining me from Helsinki is the former Prime Minister of Finland and the former advisor to the President of the European Commission, Alexander Stubb. Thanks very much for being with us this evening. So we heard from Donald Tusk, the kind of beginning of the negotiation process, if you like. What did you make of his tone? How bad could things get?
Well, I actually think that both sides, the UK and Brussels, have been very diplomatic to start off with. The 6-page letter that Prime Minister May sent yesterday, I think, was as diplomatic as you can get. And I do think that the answer of Donald Tusk was as well. But I mean, this is only a prelude. We're going to be in these negotiations basically for 24 months, and they're going to have many ups and downs. It is going to be confrontational. It is going to be difficult. But at the end of the day, we will survive and there will be a deal.
You say that it was all quite diplomatic and measured, but at the same time, the UK is constantly being told from EU leaders that they're going to get a worse deal than EU membership. I mean, in some ways, that could come across as quite spiteful, not trying to get the best deal for the UK and the EU, but trying to effectively punish the UK.
Well, you know that I'm an avid Anglophile and married to a Brit, so I'm rooting for the UK even in this difficult case. But to be quite honest, I mean, that's what EU membership is all about. When you're in the club, you get the benefits of membership. You enjoy the 4 freedoms. You get to pay a little bit. Sometimes you get a little bit back. You get to sit around the table where decisions are made. But when you decide to leave the EU, you are going to be worse off. I mean, that's what the UK voted for. And I think in that sense, it's quite honest and straightforward for Donald Tusk to say that. Britain is going to be much worse off outside. I'm sorry about that, but that's just reality.
And do you think that the EU will be united as it goes forwards into these negotiations, or will cracks begin to form that perhaps the UK can exploit?
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty united. And I mean, there are 2 things that have happened in 2016 which actually unites Europeans and European integration. One was Brexit and the other one was Donald Trump. Now, does this mean that the UK will not be playing the cards of other capitals? No. I mean, of course, if you're the UK, you're going to try to call Helsinki or Stockholm and say, listen, we here in London would like to deal with you on X, Y, and Z. Could you help us out in the negotiations? I mean, that's part of the game. But I think that the sad thing with the whole Brexit is that it's a lose-lose proposition for everyone. Usually I'm a win-win person, but this time around, the UK is going to lose and Europe is going to lose. But I do hope that we can have a civil set of negotiations and we'll be out of these negotiations with a fairly good result.
One of the first things, of course, to decide on is this idea about whether the divorce terms or the Brexit bill has to be decided before you can start talking about trade. Do you think we saw a slight softening of the EU's position on that?
Yeah, I do think so. And the reason for it is that there are basically, 2 or 3 key issues. One is the issues of citizens' rights, about 4 million people, 3 in the UK, Europeans, 3 million, and 1 million Brits in Europe. And the principles, I think, are in the right direction. And the other one are the principles for the payment, the exit bill, if you will, because they are previous commitments. And because both sides were softening on that, I think then it was easier for Europe to say that, yes, we'll start the negotiations and in parallel we'll talk about the future relationship with the UK. I mean, still, you'll probably see a few people saying that, we cannot begin the negotiations on the future before Brexit has been negotiated. I don't believe in that. You can actually do these things in parallel, and that's what will happen. If not up front, it will happen at least behind the scenes. So I wouldn't be worried about that.
And a quick thought from you to end. How do you rate Theresa May's negotiating skills so far and her diplomatic skills?
Well, she's very good. I mean, I sort of feel for her a little bit because she's an exit prime minister. She's negotiating Britain out of something and to a certain extent out of power as well. So it's not a very easy job. The big problem that the UK has, and Prime Minister May as well, is that the negotiating hand of the UK at the end of the day is extremely weak. Basically, power has now been put back into Brussels, and Brussels has all the cards to direct these negotiations. That's why I hope that both sides will stay very diplomatic and civil to the bitter end.
Thank you very much for your thoughts.